Continuing from the last chapter, to become a battle array master, Xiao Yan condensed his spiritual energy into a natal inscription. However, as soon as the white natal inscription entered his body, Xiao Yan felt his soul's power fiercely resisting it. If this continued, Xiao Yan would face the risk of his body exploding. Xiao Yan struggled with all his might to suppress the soul energy within him. But since his soul's power had already reached the Imperial Realm mortal grade, its strength had grown to such a degree that it wouldn't easily relinquish its hold over the soul sea. Get back! Xiao Yan, clearly enraged, found himself unable to suppress this rebellious soul power. If things went on like this, his physical form might suffer irreversible damage. Under his intense control, the vast soul energy within Xiao Yan gradually calmed down. The white divine motion inscription then slowly imprinted itself within the Naiwan Palace. As the divine motion inscription entered the Naiwan Palace, it seemed to find a sense of belonging, almost as if it had arrived home. Although an intense spiritual pressure initially descended on Xiao Yan's mind, it dissipated almost instantly. Huff, huff, huff! Xiao Yan panted heavily. What seemed like a fleeting moment had left him drenched in sweat. Only Xiao Yan knew the ordeal he had just endured. Although he didn't know the exact rank of the so-called divine motion inscription, the moment it entered his body, Xiao Yan felt dizzy, sensing it was no ordinary object. I originally thought your vast soul energy would require some alternative methods to suppress. After all, we have never had a precedent of someone cultivating both soul energy and spiritual power simultaneously. But who would have thought you'd manage to suppress it? A vague figure spoke slowly, clearly re-evaluating Xiao Yan's abilities. Next, we move on to inscribing the core inscription. Remember, this is not a one-time use item. After using an array, make sure to retrieve it. In today's world, items like this are quite rare. The figure added, a white scroll suddenly appearing in his hand. Activate the divine motion inscription within you, and you'll be able to carve the core inscription onto this scroll. The number of core inscriptions you can carve depends on the strength of your spiritual energy. But a strong soul power is just that, a strong soul power. Spiritual energy is not the same as soul power. In my opinion, being able to condense even a few would be quite impressive, the vague figure remarked, not underestimating Xiao Yan's abilities, considering he had not cultivated his spiritual energy at all. Hearing this, Xiao Yan closed his eyes and calmed his mind, slowly activating the recently subdued divine motion inscription. His spiritual energy flowed gently from the Naiwan Palace, moving towards the white scroll in front of him. Spiritual energy, formless and colorless, appeared similar to soul power. Yet Xiao Yan sensed a complexity between the two that wasn't so simple. With no time to ponder, he controlled his modest spiritual energy, carefully carving the core inscription onto the scroll, stroke by stroke. As the first core inscription emerged, a powerful aura seemed to emanate from the white scroll. With time, more core inscriptions appeared. By the time the 100th inscription was completed, Xiao Yan's forehead was covered in sweat, his spiritual energy nearly depleted. To think you could condense 100 core inscriptions on your first attempt, the vague figure exclaimed in astonishment. In ancient times, even the most gifted individuals could only manage 50 core inscriptions on their first try. That Xiao Yan had managed to carve out a full 100 was truly remarkable. Huff, huff, huff! Xiao Yan, satisfied, nodded at the 100 core inscriptions on the white scroll. He then summoned a projection from his soul sea, eager to test the power of this newly formed attack array. As the projection of Xiao Yan emerged, its dim eyes regained their luster. Seeing this, Xiao Yan casually waved the white scroll in his hand, casting it over his projection. As the white scroll enveloped the projection of Xiao Yan, it extended its influence over the surrounding space for several hundred meters. Powerful auras emerged, launching fierce attacks towards the projection. Despite the seemingly terrifying onslaught, the attacks on Xiao Yan's projection were like blows against a porcelain vase. Visually impressive, but without any real impact, seemingly devoid of power. It seems that to trap a peak 3-star Do-D or a 4-star Do-D expert, at least 1,000 core inscriptions would be required. Xiao Yan muttered to himself as he retracted his projection, observing the formation before him. Still, it's quite impressive, although it does consume a lot of spiritual energy. Xiao Yan clapped his hands, a mix of amazement and a hint of regret. If his spiritual energy were as formidable as his soul power, he might have been able to soar through the skies like those legendary figures, annihilating millions of enemies with a single array. However, with his current state, his spiritual energy would be exhausted before he could condense many core inscriptions. He carefully stored away the white scroll, recognizing that it wasn't a one-time use item. Its reusability made it exceptionally valuable. Xiao Yan then observed the divine motion inscription within the Naiwan Palace. At this moment, the natal inscription floated in the palace, appearing faint and dim. Clearly, it was still adapting to being housed within Xiao Yan's body, and this was only a quarter of its full form. Xiao Yan knew that it would require prolonged tempering to solidify the natal inscription fully. Gazing at the divine motion inscription in the Naiwan Palace, Xiao Yan couldn't help but smile. From now on, he could be considered a bona fide battle array master. However, he wasn't particularly interested in inscribing armor or weapons. What intrigued him most was the mysterious uses of spiritual energy. Just like the previous relic's owner had demonstrated, it could be used to trap, kill, and defend. And if cultivated to a profound level, it would not be weaker than those who cultivated Do Qi, able to kill with a mere thought. However, compared to the tangible nature of Do Qi, spiritual energy and soul power were far more ethereal and elusive. Without a certain innate talent, making progress in this area would be nearly impossible. Talent was the most crucial aspect of cultivating spiritual energy. This was why the vague figure had been so impressed upon seeing Xiao Yan's innate spiritual talent. Senior, how does one cultivate spiritual energy? And are there levels among spiritual energy-based battle array masters? Xiao Yan pondered silently before retracting his spiritual energy and the white scroll, then softly asked. The cultivation of spiritual energy primarily relies on one's will. The vague figure began to explain, but then dissipated into the cavern. Xiao Yan bowed toward the fading figure, a look of frustration in his eyes. Clearly, the figure had exhausted the last remnants of its power. Xiao Yan felt a bit downcast. Although he had successfully condensed his natal inscription and learned to form arrays, he still lacked knowledge about the hierarchy of spiritual energy. And what about the methods to cultivate it? Without understanding how to cultivate spiritual energy, how could he improve? Oh well, I guess I'll just take it one step at a time. Xiao Yan lifted his head again. Since the vague figure had vanished, he had no other options. Ever since arriving on the Do D continent, he had felt constrained and hindered. But from now on, that wouldn't be the case anymore. Over the past few days, Xiao Yan had grown familiar with the Do D continent, realizing it was much like the Do Qi continent, where the strong ruled. So, there was nothing to fear. The method to cultivate spiritual energy, huh? There should be a place where you can find it, the Golden Dragon King said, breaking his silence. Since the appearance of the vague figure, Xiao Yan's master, the Golden Dragon King, seemed to have been lost in thought, contemplating something. Master, are you all right? Xiao Yan's keen eyes didn't miss these small details. I'm fine. Since everything has been settled, the envoy from the mystic three heavens should be arriving soon to escort us, the Golden Dragon King replied. Master, you just mentioned where to find the methods to cultivate spiritual energy? Xiao Yan asked eagerly, clearly intrigued by the allure of becoming a battle array master. Just imagine, in the midst of battle, suddenly throwing out an array to trap the enemy, providing cover for Xiao Yan to merge with the Lotus of Desolation. This could be the Incense Pavilion. The world is vast, with countless sects and schools of cultivation. Each sect has its own strengths and unique aspects worth learning. However, over the millennia, rivalries among sects have deepened, leading many to become enemies. As a result, numerous sects have fallen into decline. The Incense Pavilion, an exceptional force on the Xianling continent, undoubtedly possesses formidable strength. It is one of the most peculiar places on Xianling continent because it admits two types of students, those who cultivate Do Qi, and ordinary scholars focused on academic learning. Other sects only accept cultivators, which is why the incense pavilion ranks last among the sects on Xianling continent. Yet it remains the most popular. Additionally, on the Do Di continent, weapons are of great importance. Weapons here are classified into 4 types: divine artifacts, immortal artifacts, spirit artifacts, and mortal artifacts. Mortal artifacts are the most common and ordinary, while divine artifacts are exceedingly rare, with only a few existing in the entire world, treasures that are almost impossible to come by. Immortal artifacts are crafted or refined by Do Xian level experts. They are exceedingly powerful and rare, with only a few found between heaven and earth. As for spirit artifacts, they are created by refining a mortal artifact further after it has been forged. There are many methods for refining artifacts, but the 2 most common are: the first method, used by most people in the Great Thousand Worlds, involves forcibly infusing one's own Do Qi into a mortal artifact over a long period of refinement, greatly enhancing its power and allowing it to transcend the boundary of a mortal artifact to become a spirit artifact. This method produces highly potent spirit artifacts, but it is extremely taxing in terms of both energy and time. Without strong willpower and a vast reserve of Do Qi, one is unlikely to succeed, which is why many are reluctant to put in the effort to refine spirit artifacts. The second method is the demonic tribe's artifact refining technique, which involves forcibly incorporating a living soul or the soul of a magical beast into one's mortal artifact to increase its power, thereby achieving the potency of a spirit artifact. However, this method is extremely sinister and is despised in the Great Thousand Worlds. The demonic tribe favors this approach because it is quicker and requires less effort than refining spirit artifacts by conventional methods. Judging by the ancient ruler of heavenly flames in your hand, I think it has also reached the level of a spirit artifact. Since you are heading towards the mystic 3 heavens, remember this. In the world, besides humans, there are also other spiritual beings cultivating with hopes of transforming into human form. Yet, in the eyes of humans, they are considered anomalies and labeled as demons or monsters. Like humans, these mystical beings can be good or evil. Not all demons and monsters are bad, just as not all humans are good. Don't be blinded by society's call to slay demons and exorcise devils. You must discern for yourself the good and evil of others before making any decisions. The greatest evil in the world is not these spiritual entities, but humans themselves. Remember this. Xiao Yan carefully pondered the words of his master, the Golden Dragon King, and smiled slightly. Don't worry, I won't be like them. After speaking, he glanced around, seeming to have a sense of reluctance. Xiao Yan was already aware of what his master, the Golden Dragon King, had mentioned. Within the Great Thousand Worlds, there were many strange creatures striving to cultivate. Much like the heavenly flames themselves, born from the heavens and earth, continually accumulating power until they eventually became fire spirits. And the sacred flame I mentioned also has a connection to the incense pavilion. Therefore, you must join the incense pavilion, the Golden Dragon King said gently, like a loving elder. Yes! Hearing about the sacred flame, Xiao Yan's pupils contracted, and his eyes burned with intensity as he looked at his master, the Golden Dragon King. Since arriving on the Do Di continent, apart from seeing the power of the sacred flame on the Qinglian woman within the ruins, Xiao Yan hadn't seen any other sacred flames or heard any news about them. Now, with his master mentioning the whereabouts of a sacred flame, it was like giving Xiao Yan a clear direction amidst a vast ocean. Having witnessed the sacred flame on the Qinglian woman, Xiao Yan became more convinced that there must be some unknown secret linking the heavenly flames within his body and the sacred flame. Naturally, this secret was something only Xiao Yan could uncover. However, the power of the sacred flame was truly formidable. The essence of the sacred flame was ridiculously powerful. Although Xiao Yan had tried to wield the primal power of his internal heavenly flames, it lacked the same might as the sacred flame. This realization only made Xiao Yan's desire for the sacred flame even stronger. Alright, let's head back to the Yu family. Having them around will save us a lot of trouble. the Golden Dragon King suggested. Hearing this, Xiao Yan nodded. He then sensed the projection within his soul sea and the divine motion inscription in the Naiwan Palace, and felt quite satisfied. It was clear that the legacy of the battle array master was the greatest treasure within the ruins. Compared to this, even the blood essence of the emperor was insignificant. Xiao Yan laughed, then rose and made his way to the Yu family. Inside his body, the vast soul power and spiritual energy seemed to face each other from afar. But Xiao Yan sensed some sort of connection between the two. The path of cultivation and enlightenment could only be understood through one's own journey. Without further hesitation, he activated his Do Qi and swiftly left the cave, heading toward the Yu family. "Father, will Xiao Yan be all right?" Yu Ru asked her father, Yu, anxiously in the courtyard of the Yu family. "Don't worry. If Xiao Yan was able to escape the pursuit of the Mu family in Wu City, and even cause such chaos in Wu City, he is certainly no ordinary person." Yu responded, clearly impressed with Xiao Yan. More than anything, the fact that Xiao Yan obtained great fortunes from within the ruins had made Yu regard him in a new light. Not to mention, Xiao Yan had managed to evade the Mu family's grasp all on his own. Initially, Yu and the other two elders had gone deep into the demonic beast mountain range to search for Xiao Yan, but when they couldn't find him, a massive explosion rocked Wu City soon after. It was quite evident that Xiao Yan was involved in that incident too. Yu Ru's heart was still restless. Earlier, they had checked the waterfall in the demonic beast mountain range, but there was no trace of Xiao Yan, only a scene of utter devastation. Yu Ru vividly recalled that the waterfall's current was incredibly strong, yet it had been distorted and diverted by some terrifying flame force, which had greatly alarmed them. Naturally, this made her worry even more about Xiao Yan's safety. After their fruitless search, the three of them returned to the Yu family. Just as they left the waterfall, an explosion erupted in the direction of Wu City, and all three immediately recalled Xiao Yan's words about giving Wu City a grand gift. Yu Ru paced back and forth in the main hall, clearly worried. Yu watched his beloved daughter helplessly, while the third elder had already gone out to handle other matters. As time slowly passed, a young man with a straw hat appeared at the back gate of the Yu family. "You're back," Yu Ru exclaimed. "Yes. And your sister? She has already returned." They exchanged these few words. Xiao Yan couldn't tell Yu Ru about Qing Yuan's situation. First, Xiao Yan himself didn't know how to explain it clearly. Should he say Qing Yuan was taken away? And second, the fewer people who knew about Qing Yuan, the better. Sometimes knowing too much could be a bad thing. As long as you're safe. Yu quickly interjected, then observed Xiao Yan carefully. He noticed that Xiao Yan's soul power seemed somewhat weakened, and he pondered this. "Was that explosion in Wu City you're doing?" Yu asked. "A little gift for them," Xiao Yan replied with a smile. Although he didn't want to cause trouble, if others provoked him, he certainly wouldn't let them off easily. The explosion in Wu City was just a small warning for them. And what about the incident in the demonic beast mountain range? "That was me experimenting with some new Do techniques." "You little rascal. You're quite ruthless, but I like your style." Yu laughed heartily. After all, Wu City, which had long acted like a local tyrant, hadn't been seen so disheveled in a long time. The gift Xiao Yan sent had severely weakened Wu City's strength for the time being. "Have you decided which sect to join?" Yu asked, as the three of them chatted in the hall, seeming to remember something. "The Incense Pavilion," Xiao Yan replied calmly. "The Incense Pavilion, huh? That place should be well suited for someone with such a strong fire attribute like yours. Not to mention, your status as an alchemist would earn you a decent position there," Yu mused. "However, although you're joining the Incense Pavilion, my daughter is joining the Myriad Flowers Pavilion. Even though the two pavilions are rivals, you should look out for each other while you're out there," Yu said with a smile, clearly hinting at something. "Rest assured, Senior, Xiao Yan understands." Xiao Yan quickly agreed, fully grasping Yu's implication. While the Incense Pavilion and the Myriad Flowers Pavilion were opposing sects, they were both located in the mystic three heavens. Their proximity meant that looking out for each other was only natural. "All right, you look a bit weak in soul power. You should go and rest well." It won't be long before the emissaries from the mystic three heavens arrive to take you there. Rest up until then, Yu advised, noticing that Xiao Yan's soul power seemed slightly off. Understood. Both Xiao Yan and Yu replied in unison. Xiao Yan and Yu each returned to their respective wooden huts. Inside his hut, Xiao Yan sat cross-legged on his bed, eyes closed, his hands forming peculiar seals in front of his chest. His chest rose and fell slightly, his breaths forming a perfect cycle. As he breathed in and out, his soul power began to quietly flow from his forehead. Strange, there seems to be some similarity between soul power and spiritual energy, yet they exist independently of each other. Since soul power can be cultivated through soul cultivation techniques, spiritual energy should be similar. But where can I find a cultivation method for spiritual energy? Xiao Yan murmured to himself. Don't worry about it. Once we reach the mystic three heavens, there will be a way. Worrying now is pointless, the Golden Dragon King said softly. As Xiao Yan meditated and pondered the connection between soul power and spiritual energy, the ancient ring on his finger faintly glowed before falling silent again. Huff! Xiao Yan exhaled deeply and abruptly opened his eyes. A surge of soul power, several times stronger than before, emerged. My soul power has recovered by about 80 to 90%. Xiao Yan smiled faintly after sensing his soul sea within his forehead. Indeed, when venturing outside, strength was the best guarantee, for one never knew what might happen next. After a while, Xiao Yan shook his head in satisfaction and, feeling physically drained, climbed off the bed. He stretched his slightly numb limbs. Although a Do-Di expert typically wouldn't care about such minor fatigue, with nothing else to do, Xiao Yan took the opportunity to stretch and then lay down on his bed. A few days passed by slowly. As the first rays of morning sunlight illuminated the earth, the Yu family residence took on a rather solemn atmosphere. Today was the day the envoy from the mystic three heavens was expected to arrive. Over the past few days, Xiao Yan had continued to rest and regulate his soul power. This morning, as he was casually exercising in his room, an elderly voice came from outside. Elder Xiao, clan leader Yu requests your presence in the main hall. Having been taken in as an elder enshrined to the Yu family after Yu had helped him so much, Xiao Yan was not surprised by this form of address. All right, he replied casually. After changing into a fresh set of clothes, Xiao Yan stepped out of his room and smiled at the white-robed old man outside. Let's go, steward Yu. Looking at Xiao Yan's face, the old man in white nodded kindly. As he turned, his murky old eyes flickered with a hint of barely noticeable envy. Ah, this young friend Xiao Yan, at such a young age, possesses such formidable strength, and on top of that, he is a highly skilled alchemist. These identities alone are enough to make any ordinary person envious. Following the old steward through the rear courtyard, they finally stopped outside the solemn reception hall. The steward first gestured for Xiao Yan to wait a moment, then respectfully knocked on the door before gently pushing it open and entering. The hall was quite spacious, and there were quite a few people inside. Seated at the top were the familiar faces of Yu family members, clan leader Yu and the three elders. Alongside them were a few other elderly individuals with indifferent expressions, who were likely also elders of the clan. To the left of the five main figures sat some senior family members who held influence and possessed considerable strength. Beside them were several outstanding young talents of the family. Yu was among them, and upon seeing Xiao Yan, she couldn't help but smile knowingly. On the opposite side, sitting at a position equal to Yu's, was a stranger, presumably the envoy from the mystic three heavens that Yu had mentioned earlier.